Early in Mark's record of Jesus' ministry, we see in Mark chapter 4, Jesus delivers these parables, and he even goes to the extent of explaining them to his disciples, and they keep frustrating him because they just don't get it. They don't understand the big picture. They don't understand what he's trying to teach them. And the chapter wraps with the first story of a big storm on the sea, and Jesus is where? He's asleep in the boat, and they're like, "Master, do you not care about us? Do you not care that we perish?" And after calming the waves, he chastises them, and he said to them in verse 40 of Mark chapter 4, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" As we turn into chapter 5, where we find ourselves on the east side of Galilee, likely with a non-Jewish Hellenistic population, people who might have had little exposure to Jesus at this point in his ministry. And here we find the story where Jesus cast out the legion of demons in Mark chapter 5. It paints a picture of human nature, of fear, and where we tend to place the most priority and value in life just as humans. When we read this story, Jesus cast these demons. We're going to read all 20 verses here of this story in just a second. Jesus cast out the demons into these pigs. We can't help but notice a little bit of irony. Even the demons understood that the pigs were worthless enough, unclean enough, expendable enough, that Jesus might accept them as an alternative host rather than going into the abyss. These spiritual evil forces had tormented this man for so long, they understood the pig's low standing, unclean by Jewish law, undesirable by spiritual standards, yet they still valued these hosts. What should strike us more, though, is how the people of the region responded. Instead of celebrating their neighbor's deliverance, restored, clothed, again in his right mind, they grieved the loss of these pigs. They begged, and there was 2,000 of them. It wasn't just a couple, right? They begged Jesus to leave, not because he had harmed anyone, but because his presence disrupted their comfort and their economy. The demons valued the man's life more than pigs. Jesus certainly valued this man's life more than pigs, but these town people, their priorities were inverted. They clung to material wealth, unclean wealth, more tightly than they celebrated human restoration. But before we judge them, we should ask ourselves, how often do we do the same thing? How often do we prioritize comfort, wealth, or convenience over the life, freedom, and restoration God offers? How often do we find ourselves acting out of fear rather than celebrating the restoration that God offers? Even the demons recognized the pigs were worthless, but do we? Let's read this story in chapter 5. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart and broke the shackles into pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when they saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. And the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. The herdsmen fled and told it to the city and the country, and people came to see what it was that happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there, clothed, in his right mind. And they were afraid. And those who had seen it described it to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from the region. And as he was sitting in the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. Hearing this story, we all like to imagine we stand for what's right. We're not these townspeople, right? We applaud the restoration Jesus gave. We resist evil, that we be on the right side of history. But most people don't choose evil abruptly. They accept it gradually, small compromises by small compromises, often, like these people, through fear, comfort, or self-interest, or maybe all of the above. The story of the demons and the pigs exposes this dynamic. Even the demons knew that the pigs were worthless, yet the people mourned the pigs more than they celebrated a man's freedom. And I don't think it's too much of a stretch, going back to the end of Mark 4, where Jesus is chastising the disciples who were Jews, to draw the conclusion that he's saying, you are like these Gentile pig-loving fear-mongers. Have you no faith? So that's quite an accusation. History repeats this pattern. During the rise of Nazi Germany, hatred didn't erupt overnight. It crept in gradually through fear, economic anxiety, and the quiet decisions to value comfort over consciousness. People didn't suddenly become hateful. They just tolerated small injustices because speaking up would disrupt their lives. But the time evil was undeniable, it was too late to return. I want us to ask ourselves a couple of questions tonight if we're operating out of fear. Do we act with integrity even when it costs us? Do we prioritize people over possessions? Do we welcome spiritual disruption even when it shakes our comfort? Or are we afraid? Do we operate out of fear? Even the demons knew the pigs were worthless. But do we? I hope that we can prioritize ourselves this evening to value people, to value God's restoration, and not be fearful. We had a great Bible class on a very similar subject just tonight, from Mark, no less. So I commend that to you here. But if you are fearful, I encourage you to be courageous, to step forward and to start living God's way. If that's being baptized tonight or surrounding yourself with God's brothers and sisters in love, we're here for you if we can help. Please come forward while we stand and sing.